just wanted to hug him, but I couldn't move. I was in this kind of suspended state. I couldn't move a muscle. Well, of course we stay in existence. Of course we keep living because we are consciousness.
Kia ora, hello, and welcome back. This is the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. I'm your host, Kirsty Salisbury. Today I'm chatting with a fellow Kiwi. Her name is Annwyn. Annwyn is a spiritual mentor. She's a healer, she's an author, and she was transformed by the sudden loss of her 17-year-old son. Her journey led her into a soul discovery, sailing around the Pacific Ocean, exploring sacred sites, and discovering that grief could be a gateway to transformation. Guided by her son's wisdom from beyond, she embraced a soul-directed life, proving that love and connection may never end. It's a beautiful story, and Annwyn, welcome along. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Kirsty. I'm just delighted to be here with you.
I know this is a really personal story. I know that you've got a history. You lost your son when he was 17. Is that where your story started, or were you always into spiritual things and seeking out what happens after this life before then?
It was the great catalyst of awakening for me. And, I really admire people who come to their spiritual journey just through very centered, balanced things like yoga and self-exploration and growth and development. But for many of us, it takes a great big cosmic kick. And so that was the case for me. And so up until the time when Tim had his car crash, he was nearly 18. And yes, that was a huge awakening for me. It was shocking. It turned my world upside down, and I had a lot to deal with, and particularly supporting my 16-year-old daughter as well, who was absolutely devastated.
Yeah.
So yes, that was the beginning, and that was in the year 2000. So it's many years ago now, and I guess it took me a decade to really work through grief, to understand grief, but most importantly, to understand that there is no death. And this is the journey that my son Tim took me on from the world of spirit, because right from the very beginning, I had contact initially through my own soul. So the very night that he died, I was getting these little internal messages saying, remember, you knew this was going to happen. And I had no idea what that was about or what that would mean. But at the same time, I felt this incredible sense of calm around me. So it was a very, very interesting first few days because I had this twin self operating. Part of me was just in absolute human mother shock. Part of me was dying, shriveling up inside. But part of me was also having this gentle, but very curious excitement about what on earth is that? There's something going on here. And you see, that's the first seeds of the soul awakening. And I think everybody who goes through a major event has this. It's like an act of grace from our soul. And it's up to us what we do with it. Whether we ignore it, whether we open ourselves to it. I want to know more about this. I think and I think Eckhart Tolle, the author of The New Earth, he says the same thing. And because he had a very life-defining moment too, where he had the aha, life is not as it seems. We're all being part of this conditioned program with all of these erroneous beliefs and ideas. And death is one of the biggest of those erroneous ideas.
I think it really is, isn't it? Because all of us are going to go there. None of us are getting out of here alive. We're all going to this place of death, of what we perceive as an ending. And yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying. It really resonates with me. But I really love that you're talking about the different things that were taking place. You've got the grief, you've got the turmoil as a mother to lose their son. I mean, my heart just, it just gets really upset by hearing that. But you're talking about the hope and talking about how death isn't necessarily the end, and that there's this
No.
beautiful communication going on.
Absolutely. And, eventually, 12 years after Tim passed, I published a book called Dry Your Tears. Now, with a new cover, a new name, it's called Flying in the Face of Grief. And this touches on what we've just been talking about, because although there's still a strong focus on healing grief, and I fully believe that we can totally, totally recover from grief, even the loss of a child, but I also have really emphasized the other part of the message that there is no death. And the subtitle of the book is called The Ever Being of Life. Now, what does that mean? That means that I have come to a very, very, very strong and deep understanding there simply is no ending. We
Mm,
are spirit in the body. Spirit is consciousness. We are consciousness. Consciousness can take any shape or form. It transcends time and space. It's not limited to any time. It's not restricted by being in any place. It's everywhere.
mm,
And so if we think about when we release the physical aspect of our soul, and that's all our body is, it's the physical aspect of our body. It's the physical aspect of our soul. Well, of course we stay in existence. Of course we keep living because we are consciousness. And our human expression is just one form of consciousness.
mm.
So this is maybe quite a shift in perspective for many people if they're hearing this for the first time. But when you think about it, how many people have got absolute evidence of life in the afterlife? And you yourself, Kirsty, had a near-death experience. And I also belong to an amazing group called the Shared Crossing Project. And
Yes.
hundreds, thousands of people around the world are sharing their very tangible experiences of either accompanying a loved one who is passing, transitioning to the spirit world. And that can happen through visions or through hearing messages, that sort of thing. I have a lovely story about my experience of that. A few days after Tim passed over, I was woken out of a very deep sleep and I was just totally alert. You know how sometimes you're in that state of awareness and you're just so crystal clear about everything. Everything's
Yeah.
just wow. Well, it was
Mm.
one of those kind of dream states, except I really was awake. My eyes were open, I was awakened. And I could hear this sort of staticky noise in the room, like white staticky noise, if you like, high pitched noises. And I looked to the side of my bed and there was Tim.
Oh,
He
wow.
was standing right by my bed. And he looked so real. And I reached out to touch, as you can imagine, because he was only a little boy. He was showing himself around the age of 2 years old. Darling
Oh,
little boy,
okay.
all golden curls, freckles on his nose, absolutely adorable. I just wanted to hug him, but I couldn't move. I was in this kind of suspended state. I couldn't move a muscle. I could move my head to look at him, but I couldn't speak. And I was just so transfixed. And as I looked at him, and I wasn't frightened, I was just amazed. I watched him grow. He grew taller and taller, and he moved through the milestones of his short life. And his clothing changed. He was schoolboy starting school. He was in his soccer gear, playing soccer around about the age of 10,
Yeah.
and right through till the age he went when he was nearly 18, wearing his teenage clothes and hoodie and skateboard under one arm. Then he showed me how he would look round about the age of 30. And then the most magical thing happened. Right before my eyes, we would call it shape shifting. He
Hmm.
changed form. He shape shifted into a huge white barn owl towering over my bed, filling the whole room.
Oh,
And then he just
wow.
lifted and raised his wings a few times and then just went up and away.
Oh, wow. With
And sorry, I just in that early state, I thought, oh, he just wanted to show me he's all right. He wanted to show me what he would look like as a grown man because we always wanted that. But it was years later I realized true meaning of that vision. He was to guide me as my white owl of wisdom. You know, the owl is so synonymous
Mm.
with wisdom, but also the owl sees everything and says very little. But when it does, it has something to say. Now, Tim was like that in his life. The teenagers at his funeral spoke about this. They said we would all be sitting around trying to work out a huge world problem and saying this, saying that, and never quite getting to it. Tim would say nothing. And then when we'd all finally become quiet, he would just sum it all up in a few words. And we'd go, "Oh, that's what we've been trying to say." So he
Wow.
had this wisdom all the way through, and then he really shared it with me from the spirit world. And he has done that all the way through ever since. For the last 25 years, I have been guided by Tim.
Yeah. Oh, I'm right there with you. I had an experience when my father passed away. The night of, well, it was actually the next day because I was in Europe at the time. I had to fly back to New Zealand. I had an experience where, same thing, I woke up in the night and I was clear as anything in my mind. He was standing beside the bed, but I didn't physically see him. My eyes couldn't see him. There was no form. There was just a knowing that he was there. So kind of
Mm.
similar. So as you're speaking, I'm like, yes. And I have heard so many of these accounts where they come back. Um, Gosh, there's so many thoughts in my head. So he was there as a 2-year-old. Oh, you just want to hug him, wouldn't you? And you can't move. So that
Exactly.
I was like, what a tease. That's almost
I
like
know.
unfair.
And being just paralyzed, but I think it was because um, it was such an incredible moment I mean, I think it would have taken a huge effort on the part of all of my guides and team to present him and looking in such a physical way. I mean, because my vibration wasn't very high itself at that time, I was
Yeah.
grieving.
Yeah,
Very
of
hard
course.
for our loved ones to come to us when we're in such deep, utter grief. So I think it would have been really essential that I didn't touch him because I I could have just interrupted that whole process by doing that. Do you
Yeah.
understand what I mean about that?
Yep,
My
I
vibration?
totally do. Totally understand. And I wonder as well as that where my father didn't quite come through enough is because the
Yeah,
energy to do that required is so
yeah,
much.
yeah,
In the meantime, my husband's next to me fast asleep. No idea that this is even happening.
yeah.
Um, yeah, just beautiful. So yeah, as a little 2-year-old, I mean, you just want them to get into bed and have a cuddle, don't you?
Oh, I know.
And
Yeah.
then to go through the ages. So I'm curious. I've heard a lot of people talk about how when they've seen loved ones in the spirit or they've had an experience, maybe a shared death experience where they're seeing the person go through to the next realm, whatever that is. And I kind of like to think that once we leave here, it's almost like another birth, that it's a welcome excitement thing. You know, when a little baby's born, it's so exciting. I think that when we leave this world and this realm, it can be like a birth into the next, whatever that is. And I think that's an exciting thing.
I totally agree with you. And I guess in my early stages of recognizing that, I still thought about, oh, this is very beautiful. I know Tim still is with me, but he's there and I'm here, like in different realms. But what I
Yeah.
understand, and I perfectly understand why so many people have that understanding. But as we go deeper and deeper into this, and as my own spiritual evolution developed, I recognize now that, as I said earlier, everything is consciousness. We are consciousness. And
Yeah.
so it's really a matter of meeting Tim in the same consciousness. Now, I can be with, like, he's right here. Like, this whole room is just filled with people in spirits in all sorts of consciousness because I had done so much in the work. And part of that was healing my grief, understanding that there is no death and raising my own vibrational frequency to the same level or enough of a similar level to meet with him and other spirits. And it's so enriching and it's so exciting and it's such an amazing relationship to have with another
Mm.
because I now feel there is no separation. And
Mm.
this is a big part of my message. we feel grief, we experience death when we are still thinking of the belief about separation. And that's a really big key to understanding there is no death, the ever being of life. And that's really one of the main reasons why Tim left, so that together we would run through this message. It was
Okay.
a beautiful, beautiful gift. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I don't want to underestimate grief. Grief is very real, and I believe it's a process we need to go through, and there's so much teaching in,
Oh, it's a sacred, noble passage.
yes, in those raw emotions and that feeling. So I don't
Mm,
want to underestimate that, but I do love what you're saying is when the idea of separation is reduced or
yeah,
no longer there, which is a common theme with people who've
yeah.
had experiences with people at bedsides, when somebody's dying, near death experience, shared death experience, out of body, all of these beautiful things. A common theme is the fear of death is so greatly reduced because it's
Mm,
not seen as an end
yeah.
or a loss. So, yep, I resonate with what you're saying completely. I want to jump back to he was a 2 year old. So, what some experiences have shared, quite another common theme, I suppose, is that when they get a glimpse of someone who has left this world, someone who has died, they're often at a different age. And there's theories around they're at their prime age of where they would have been when they lived. Now, I haven't heard of somebody so young and then seen them when they're older. But when you said that, when you said he got to about 30 years old and you got to see him what he would look like as an adult, I couldn't help but think about that point of, do you think that that was his prime? Like if he was in, I'm going to use the word heaven just for a label, would he be around that 30 years old, or do you think he was that 2 year old, or does that not even come into it? It's just watching him
No,
grow.
it's not because they're human concepts
Yeah, they
and
totally are.
they're human concepts and they're based around time and space.
Yeah.
And where he is, there is no time and space. And so I think it was very beautiful that he showed himself as a roundabout a, lovely 30-year-old man. And I've read many accounts and spoken to many others who their beautiful mother, father, grandmother, whatever, often shows himself at around similar age. My father does that. I see him sometimes, leaning against the apple tree, and he always looks like he's around about that age. He never ages, and yeah, so it's I don't know why they do that. I think it's just maybe comforting for us until we've sort of moved beyond those human ideas about age and time and space.
Yeah.
But as I progress more in my own journey, I'm releasing those concepts myself. I'm starting to live more and more outside of time. I don't follow the clock. Last night
Yeah.
I was doing Qigong outside between midnight and 1 o'clock this morning.
Oh, wow.
Just worked out the way. I didn't set that intention, but it was just where my energy was and what I felt like
Yeah.
doing. I had the most marvelous sleep. Before I went to bed, I asked Tim and all my guides to work through me this morning on the interview. So yeah, he's a very integral part of my existence as in the human body. And
Yeah.
I don't feel separated from him. And can I tell you something that I learned from what we call the
Oh,
ascended
yes,
masters?
please. Yes, please.
And this is something that I teach in my workshops that there's many ideas about the idea of the creation of our planet Earth, and I don't want to um, undermine anybody else's ideas. I accept and embrace all ideas, but this
Mm,
is from a spiritual perspective that I personally resonate with. So the understanding is that eons ago, like we're going back before time was even time, and we're talking in terms of just pure consciousness, when souls came and actually created this planet that we call Earth or Gaia. Um, we came as pure consciousness. We had no shape, no form. We would just come and we would create, and we created this beautiful planet of the oceans and the forests and everything that we know to be Earth.
mm,
There were 12, apparently there were 12 soul groups that came to do this, one after the other, and each added their layer of creation. So imagine when this planet was a very beautiful, pristine planet, and souls came here and they were not informed. And gradually, other beings from other planets also came. Oh, this is beautiful Earth. Let's go and see what's going on there. But they were not pure consciousness. They were informed, and they had already moved away from their original source of creation, which I will just call source energy.
Mm.
Okay. And so, of course, there was some interaction, and that's always very, evolving for souls to encounter other experiences and other forms of consciousness, and they enjoyed the interaction. Gradually, some influence crept in, and the souls gradually moved more and more away from source as pure consciousness and gradually adapted and took on some of the form and density of these other encounters, the beings that they had encountered. Now, that was all very well, and it was all very amazing and great learning, but there was a snag. They were no longer pure consciousness, and they could no longer go backwards and forwards from source as they had previously done, because now they had taken on some form.
Mm.
In order to go back to home, which we call spirit realms or source, they had to create death. They had to release the form. That was the
Interesting.
origins of death, releasing the form so they could go back home to source as pure consciousness.
Wow. I've never actually come across that in that way.
My
That
whole
is
body has just
fascinating.
gone. My whole body's just gone into tingles and tingles and tingles as I'm saying this. So
Oh, really? My head's just like,
this message has been broadcast out with such beautiful energies to anybody listening to just
wow,
absorb,
wow.
just absorb that. That is the origins of death.
Oh, yes, because I get asked the question, why do we need to die? Why is death a thing? Why does death exist? Why is it important?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take that and I'm going to have a little percolation session and let that just do its thing. Wow. Okay. Gosh,
So
that feels really significant. Thank you, Anwyn.
look, you just think about that when people can really absorb that concept. And look, it's not a religious concept. It's what
No.
we would call a universal law. And it's just timeless. And a lot of my work now is about consciousness, energies, and vibrational frequencies. And what I wish people to really work with is that when they shift up their consciousness, when they increase their own vibrational frequency, they are never going to feel apart from their loved ones because you're meeting them in the same room, if you like. Imagine a corridor full of all these doors, and you've got grief in one door, you've got sorrow, you've got loss, you've got betrayal, you've got, all those what we call low vibrational frequencies.
Mm,
And then on the other one, we've got peace and joy and love. If you go into one of those doors, that's where your loved ones are. They cannot be in those other doors. They cannot be in those other rooms because their vibrational frequency is too high for that now. They can't, they
because
just
they're not
literally can't,
here.
we can't meet you there.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Mhm.
Wow, it's so interesting. I want to jump right back to the first couple of minutes that we started talking, Anwyn. You were talking about how in those few days after you found out about Tim's death, there was a prompting of remember you chose this, remember you knew this was coming.
Yes,
I've heard this before, and a lot of it was around the individual, a lot from near-death experiences of remember who you are, remember who you truly are, your true essence,
yeah,
because we forget so much of that when we come here into these bodies.
yeah. That,
Um, do you think that you and Tim decided on this before you came here? Do you think this is a predetermined event in life?
I'm nodding.
Yeah, I notice you're nodding.
Nodding and smiling. Yes, 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 absolutely yes. And this is another big part of my teaching and my book. We have soul groups. and we're always evolving as consciousness. We are never on pause. We are always evolving and growing and growing. And there are levels of consciousness so far beyond our current comprehension that we just can't even go there at the moment. But what we can do within the human form is quite extraordinary. And we can actually become, just embodied consciousness, but still walking around having a great time on the earth. But yes, indeed. Now we have soul groups. And so we tend to reincarnate with the same souls over and over again. And we agree to take on different roles. Now, these are called soul contracts. And it means that Tim and all of the other closest family members of our soul group all agreed that Tim would come part of the way in this lifetime. Mm. Now, there were several reasons for that. Excuse me, they're always very good at milking the best out of any incarnation. So there were some really good reasons. Now, one of the reasons was because he and I are a team. We are messengers for spirit, and we have done this many, many times before, where one of us will come part of the way as a son, as a daughter, as a sibling, as a husband and wife, whatever. We do all of these things, take out the human element. We're talking about souls. And we, so for Tim and I, one of us will go back to the realms and the other will stay. And we work together as a team from the different realms. Now, it can take on a different aspect, have a different purpose each time. But in this particular lifetime, it was for me to be a messenger around ascension that we're all going through at the moment. And one of the greatest obstacles to ascension are the low vibrational frequencies held with grief. So this is our big piece of work. And, the book that I've written is his book as much as mine. And Laura's, my daughter, because she's another part of why he came part of the way. Now, my daughter Laura and Tim are what they call twin souls. So it's when a soul expands so greatly that it splits off into other aspects. But they're very, very closely bonded and on a soul level. Now, quite often, twin souls don't incarnate together. It can actually be very difficult for them because they're so much alike. It can actually be on the human field. It can be quite an area of conflict.
I can imagine. Yeah, because you're so similar.
But my children were quite unique in that way. They were just so harmonious, and they got on so well together. They've had so many, many lifetimes together as twins, as siblings, as brother, just everything. But it had got to the point where Laura had become rather dependent on Tim, and she had entwined herself so much into his soul essence and his energy field. It was hard to tell who Laura was now. One of the reasons for Tim going was that Laura would have to have a lifetime without him. She was not happy about this. No. And she knew that it was possible, or she agreed to it, of course, on the soul level before incarnation.
Yeah, before.
But when you drop down, as soon as you're in that womb, you're in human consciousness too. And she was already feeling the hesitation of, oh my God, I could lose him in this lifetime. Now, I had so many false alarms with her. Well, first of all, the minute I stopped breastfeeding Tim, she was in my womb.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Past my IUD, being a bit personal, but look, this is what happened. I'm not staying up here without my brother.
Yeah.
I'm coming.
Get me there.
She was there. But then she had this reluctance. Oh my God, she didn't want to come up. She didn't want to come up. And then she developed asthma about the age of 7. This was when her soul was starting to remember this is the lifetime. She was already feeling the emotional overwhelm of that, and she developed asthma. And then a year before Tim actually died, she went completely off the rails. Her whole personality just changed so dramatically, unrecognizable. I actually had to send her off to a remote part of the country to be looked after by some family friends because I was not able to look after her. I couldn't be certain that she would be safe. She was doing alcohol or just crazy stuff. And then we realized much later, of course, on the soul level and somewhere on the human level, she knew her brother was about to go. So a year later, he passed over. Laura was devastated, absolutely crippled with grief. It was
Mm,
uh, that was the hardest part, was telling her the news. And oh my God, I just saw another death that night. I saw her
mm.
death, and it was shocking. And a few weeks after the funeral, Laura tried to take her life because she just couldn't bear to be on the earth without him.
Yeah.
But we got her in time, and she has stayed. She was angry with her brother. How dare you leave me? It took
Yeah.
her 11 years to release her anger. Of course, she was grieving. The sorrow was extraordinary, but
Oh,
she was
yeah.
also angry. I was not angry because I understood it on the soul level why Tim had gone. I had to grieve through the human level. But
Mm,
darling Laura was coping on two levels of huge grief, the human and the soul level.
mm, mm.
Yeah, but she's amazing. She has come through. And the day that she actually had a big aha moment, so she was only, what, she was still only about 24 when she finally realized, I'm going to forgive my brother. She was walking on the beach. She had two little children of her own then. I was looking after them. And she said, Mum, I went and I sat on the seat down by the beach and I decided I would forgive Tim and four other of my friends who had also passed over, most of them through suicide.
Mm.
She said, I just decided I would forgive them all for leaving me. And she had a really big emotional releasing. And then she said, when I looked up, there were five seagulls circling above my head.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love all those little signs and they bring
Yeah.
comfort. They really do. I mean, you can look
Yeah.
into that, you can ignore that. I'm not saying it's definitely a thing, but I feel like the little signs can really play a huge part in healing and
I
just
do.
feeling connected to something. So,
And that is the connection.
yeah,
These
yeah,
signs are
exactly.
the connection. They're waving. Hello, hello, I'm here, I'm here. Take note.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, what I'm hearing from you confirms my thoughts as well, is that when we're going through something really hard, well, remember we chose this anyway. We agreed to this, to come here, to have this
Yeah,
experience, to have this learning phase, I suppose, in
yeah,
our life. Which can be
definitely.
really hard because then you're going, why did I agree to what mind was I in? I wasn't in my right mind, when obviously not, because it doesn't work like that. But why would I agree to this?
Yeah,
So there's so many reasons to be here and to go through these harder things in life and remember who we truly are at soul
yeah.
level. So I really like what you're saying.
Well, I've learnt that Earth is considered one of the most difficult planets to experience
Yeah,
because,
I keep hearing this.
yes, because we have emotions. Not all beings in forms of consciousness on other areas in the galaxy and universe actually experience the emotions, but because we do, we experience things so deeply. We're very sought after as teachers when we're back in the realms, because not all
Okay.
souls incarnate on Earth. You don't have to come to Earth. They
Yeah.
say it's the bravest of the brave come to Earth. So you're all pretty amazing souls just by being here in the first place.
Oh, yay. I love that. I'm going to hang on to that. Yeah. What
You have
about I don't normally go down the pathway because I know that this is a very sensitive topic, but you mentioned that Laura had tried to take her
yes,
life.
yes.
What happens there? Is that something that we agree to before we come here, that we will have a suicide attempt or whatever you want to call it? Or is
Okay.
that where we go, actually, I'm out. This is too much. I know I agreed to this, but I'm out.
There's a chapter in my book called Dropping Out. And I hadn't intended to include a chapter about suicide because that wasn't the experience that I'd been through with Tim.
Yeah.
But something happens. Sometimes spirit will want you to write about something and they have ways of getting that through to you. And I kept seeing in my mind's eye this beautiful, what we call an orb, a sphere of light, like a glowing globe of light. It was beautiful, purply colour.
Mm.
And I would just see it. and I would sometimes see it actually in the corner of the room. And I'm not a particularly psychic visual person. I feel things, but I
Mm.
was actually seeing this, and I didn't know what it was. And but I did start to notice that the topic of suicide was coming into my awareness a lot. I'd walk into a room with the television set was on and be an interview about teenage suicide, or I just kept hearing about it. It was just really being presented into my awareness. And then one night I had a very vivid recall um, of something that actually happened about 3 months before Tim's accident. Two of his friends committed suicide.
Oh my
One was
goodness.
called Floyd, and the other girl was called Jess. Now, I had seen Floyd just a few days before he took his life. I was coming home from an evening out, and this was in Littleton in Christchurch. And I was driving up the road to my house, and I saw a figure, a teenager, staggering across the road, drinking wine, paper bag around the bottle,
Mm.
the hoodie, the baggy pants down to the knees as they were wearing
Mm.
in 2000. And it was Floyd. And I said, "Oh, Floyd, hey, mate, come on, I'll give you a ride home." "Oh, hi, Tim's mum." He said, "No, I'm fine, I'm fine." I said, "Come on, and I'll take you home." "No, no, no, really, I'm fine." But so he wouldn't come. Okay, so I went home. And I felt terrible when I heard that he had taken his life soon after that. Now,
Oh, wow.
now, all those years later, 12 years later, when I was writing my book, he wanted his story told. Not just him, but thousands and thousands of other souls who had departed through suicide. They
Oh
formed
my
this
goodness.
collective. They formed a collective and they presented themselves as this orb of light. So I meditated and I finally understood what they wanted. They wanted me to write about it. Now, when I have to backtrack a bit here and tell you another piece. When I was learning all about this and what had happened to Tim and why, I had been guided. Somebody told me about a woman in Christchurch who channeled an ascended master. So I went and had quite a few sessions there. Now, this was completely new to me. I had never had anything so much as a teacup reading. I just
Mm.
wasn't that way
Mm.
inclined at all. But I felt to go. I really went, and it was so supportive. And so I continued to do this over the years, and at times I never went because I was just busy evolving, getting on with life. But when I had big questions, I would go back and ask some more questions. So I decided, okay, I want to understand about suicide from a spiritual perspective. So what I was told was that, yes, this group wanted their message to be told because when somebody departs the earth through old age or illness or an accident like Tim, it's a created exit, a soul choice. It's the way that they're going to go.
Mm.
A suicide, in most cases, is not soul directed, it's human directed. And so, quite often, it's not the time. It wasn't actually the agreed time. So, Laura had actually asked lots of questions about Floyd way back in the early days. And we had recorded them. So I dug out a lot of the old, they were cassette tapes, and I
Mm.
listened to them. And I was told that it was not Floyd's time, but he had felt so at loss. He had felt he'd done things he wasn't proud of. He was only 16. He
Oh
thought
my
he'd really
gosh.
messed up, and he just couldn't see any other way out. And he apparently he would have become quite a spiritually developed person if he'd stayed.
Mm.
Um, but he hung himself at the church. He wanted his
Oh,
mother
at the
to meet him.
church.
Because his parents were very religious, and so
Right.
he, in his human perspective, "Mum, I'm gone with Jesus," kind of thing. He knew his mother would think that. But he said, that he was perfectly happy in the realms. He visited his family often. He was always saddened by sadness he caused for them, but he loved the fact that they were planting a garden in his memory. But the main message was there's no guilt, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing shameful, that we should not be judging any person who leaves by their own hand. It's simply that they couldn't see any other choice. And they do come back very quickly. So they will always reincarnate very quickly to
To resume
resume where
a
they left off.
similar life of same
Probably,
difficulty.
probably with the same
Yeah,
sort of issues. And yeah, but of
yeah,
course they will get extra help while we're here, I would imagine. Did
yeah.
that answer
Yeah,
your question? Hmm.
I just find it really, really hard, actually. I find this topic very, very difficult because I've lost people in my life to suicide as well.
Yes,
But I'm going back to the soul contract when you're saying we agreed to things before we come here.
yes,
I
yeah.
can't help but feel a bit ripped off for the family members or the ones, so say Lloyd's family or best friends, or if he had oh, he was quite young, if he had a girlfriend or, any significant people in his life, that wasn't what they agreed to.
No, it wasn't.
So
It
they then
wasn't.
have to go through this really hard experience. And it's not like, remember, you knew this was coming. Remember, you
But as
chose this.
Lloyd said, Lloyd said, there are huge gifts of healing in life and in death. And he said
Okay.
that it's not, he said mostly we don't see it. Mostly we don't see the gifts from life. And he said mostly we certainly don't see the gifts through death. But he said they're there. And he
Yeah.
said it did
Okay.
bring enormous healing to his family eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm aware it could totally transform the pathway that somebody's on, physically
Well,
and spiritually. And
in the end, though, it's all about raising your consciousness. And,
mm,
if anything's going to do that, grief is.
yeah, yeah. Grief is so powerful, isn't it?
It so is.
So powerful.
It's an underestimated tool of transformation. And I mean, I want to get to the point in my as a messenger that I want to like sell it. I'm going to
What?
make grief so damn popular that everybody's going to want some because,
Oh, right. Okay. I was thinking, how do you sell grief?
well, yeah, just yeah, it's an interesting concept, isn't it? I just want to turn it
Yeah.
upside down. I want to, as my book title says, I just want to fly, and I am flying in the face of grief because
Yeah.
to me, it's the most wonderful thing that happened. I would never have been on the journey. I would never be at the point I am in my life with the understanding I have, with the consciousness I have, the beautiful life that I have, had it not been for Tim. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm so grateful.
Yeah. It is really, really beautiful. I'm thinking of the people who might be listening to this, or people that we know who you talked at one point about the hallway with the different doors and the vibration of the negative, and they can't go to the low vibration
Mm,
because they
yeah,
can't
yeah,
incarnate back into that. They've left the physical body.
yeah.
People that are going through grief and loss or any really difficult situation who aren't having the same sort of experience that you had, who haven't had that visitation, who haven't felt their loved one around or whatever the scenario might be, what do you think they could do to maybe lessen the burden of the grief?
Um, well, I did have to go through all of that too, because although I had those early, um, messages and those incredible things were happening, I did actually, I was also grieving. And so there were times when I couldn't connect with Tim and I didn't feel him because I was so overwhelmed with grief. And I actually ran away from grief. I went away sailing on a yacht for 6 years and
Six
I
years.
did 6 years.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
And cruising the South Pacific
Yeah,
seas.
yeah,
And
fantastic.
it was my total avoidance from grief. And I, although I was doing a lot of other inner work, which was very, 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 very valuable, I wasn't healing my heart. And when I finally came back to live in Christchurch again, I went through what they call the dark night of the soul because I had to face the fact that Tim still wasn't here and I missed him desperately and I wanted him back. And why couldn't I hear him anymore?
Mm,
So the next piece of inner work was to heal my heart. And I did that through, I learned a very ancient healing technique. The equivalent would be Reiki. It was not Reiki, it was called magnified healing, but people are probably quite familiar with Reiki. I
mm,
worked with a goddess called Kuan Yin, her beautiful energies. She's synonymous with healing the heart. So I just did this every day I learned this modality. I had to go away to Wellington to learn it, and I did it every day. And I gradually felt my heart healing and healing and healing. And in the end, I ended up teaching others that same modality. But I had to go through that dark night of the soul and actually face the deepest, deepest grief, which was 6 years after Tim died.
Mm,
It was not
okay.
immediately after. And I kind of wonder why people write books so early into their grieving journey. I'm being a bit bold saying this, but to me,
Yeah.
you ain't there yet.
Yeah.
40
I'll
later.
be honest, Anwyn, there's a little piece of me that's like, okay, you did go through the grief, you did go through the hard stuff. I don't know why that's there, but there's a piece of me that just thinks it's so important. And
Got to go. You really have to
we,
feel. Look, most people will not go to the place where you really feel the gut wrenching. You just are worried that you'll never come out of it again.
yeah, yeah,
And you have to have, you need someone to support you through that. You need someone who's either been through it or understands it, and they're with you when you need to ring them in the middle of the night and saying, just overwhelming. Also, somebody gave me the book at that time when I'd just gone through that dark night of the soul where you don't know who you are anymore.
mm,
You've stripped away so many layers of who you thought you are, and that's what I was doing when I was sailing. I was actually stripping away all the roles that I had acquired, the erroneous beliefs about me that I had acquired. Um, but then I found the book by Eckhart Tolle, and I thought, oh my God, you dear man, you wrote this book just for me. How did you know? You're in my head. He nails it. He absolutely nails it. And I thoroughly recommend that book. It was transformative for me. It really helped me understand what I'd gone through and then what the human mind does to try and take you back to where you were. And this is where the work kicks in, and you have to be so mindful of what your thoughts are and what your beliefs are, because the thoughts are what lead us down the road into the emotion.
yeah, yeah.
So that would be my advice, would be to um, find somebody, find the book, find my book. It's not bad.
Links are down below in the show notes, just saying.
Actually, I quote Eckhart Tolle because I'll just pick it up because he's so absolutely right. He says, "Death is a stripping away of all that is not you." That's what I did when I was sailing for 6 years. But then you
Mm.
don't get too lazy. That's the dark night of the soul. The rest of the quote is, "The secret of life is to die before you die and find that there is no death." So
Oh,
yeah, is
interesting.
it
Yeah.
wonderful? So
Yeah. See,
what he means by that, it's the death of the limitation. You have to let all those limiting ideas that your human form presents to you to remember that you are consciousness, you are spirit,
yeah.
consciousness, and body. That's the death.
Yeah.
That's the only death.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like it. I think there's different deaths because when you say that, there's a quote that I really live by and I really love is don't die before you're dead.
Yeah.
So that's
I
talking
thought,
more about, people who are stuck in ruts or stuck in
oh,
routine that they hate their life or they're not happy in their life and they're just doing Groundhog Day. Every day is the same. They go to a job they don't like. They're stuck in a relationship which isn't working. They're doing things, life isn't working, or they're walking around and they're completely void and dead on the inside. They've got no spark or joy. And so I'm
oh,
always like, don't die before you die because we can have this big, juicy life. It just might be stretching boundaries and comfort zones and go and try something completely foreign, like go and do a class of some sort or start reading or
yeah,
whatever it is, start meditating, go and read that book that you've suggested.
yeah.
So
Living
then
life.
you're talking about to die before we die. That's a whole different type of death. That's acknowledging that death is going to happen and to give up
Only the
everything we
release of
cling
the
to.
body. That's only the release of the body. So
Yeah.
I could release my body right after the interview. I promise I won't do it till we finish. But let's say,
Thank you.
let's say, if there's a big silence, you'll know what's happening. But say I wanted to release my body and my soul agreed with that. That yes, okay, Armin, you can come back now. Yep, I've completed everything I wanted to complete through you. I would just simply go.
Mm.
I might just die in my sleep. I don't think I'd mess myself up in an accident or anything like that. I would just take my clothes off, fold them neatly, and go into the forest. Now, people used to do this.
Yes.
People used to do this. They understood. I'm talking about our ancients.
Yeah.
We are the new, we're them. Remember, we're incarnations. We are them. We can do this too, but we've come a long way away from that understanding of knowing that we are consciousness in the body. We've forgotten it. That's why we're always been saying, remember who you truly are. Because it's so expansive and it's so liberating and it's, oh my God. And you stop engaging with all the trivia. There's so
Yeah.
much trivia. There's so many distractions. And that's one of the greatest hindrances of our spiritual journeys at this time on the earth. At times it's been, we've lived through wars, we've lived through famines, we've done all sorts of things. Now it's media, data, information, distraction. And we're
Yeah.
still going down all those rabbit holes and forgetting who we are.
Yeah. It's so true. We absolutely are.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Gosh, I feel like we could chat for a long time, Anna. Yeah, I think a little bit about a question I like to ask is if you knew when you were going to die, would you want to know? But then also the question, if you knew how you were going to die, would you want to know?
Oh,
Or
but
if
we
you could
choose it.
choose how you die.
We choose it. We choose everything. We choose
Yeah, this
how
is what I'm getting to. Do
we
you
do.
think we choose it
Yeah,
all?
absolutely. I have been told I'm going to live uh, to a very, very old age, but when somebody from
Oh, I
spirit
feel a
tells
bit sorry for you.
me, what does that mean in spirit? But I tell you what, there was I've had an opportunity to go back. It was after I published the book for the first time in 2012. And I'd gone through that dark night of the soul. I'd done so much, wrote the book. I really healed grief. I got my message out there that Tim and I had wanted to get out there through the book.
Mm.
And I had a very strange situation of not feeling suicidal because I wasn't feeling desperate, but I had a really strong urge to go home.
Mm.
And I had that for 3 days, but it got a little bit distressing by the third day because I felt really combobulated and confused. I just felt I wasn't in the right place anymore. I felt I could go home to spirit, I mean. And I went to see a friend who was an art teacher, a Rudolf Steiner trained teacher. And I told her what I was feeling. She sat me down with a piece of paper, a jam jar of water, some paintbrushes, and a palette of colours. I
Mm.
was crying. I was just crying, crying, crying. And she left the room, and I just took up the yellow, and I just painted yellow, yellow. I didn't paint any form. I just used yellow. And then I didn't say goodbye to her. I just left the house, went home, slept for about 12 hours, woke up the next morning and thought, oh, I'm staying. And I learned later that that was a moment of negotiations in the spirit realm. I could have gone back and continued to do my work from there because a lot of people do that, they
Yeah.
continue to work from there. But no, it was decided I would stay and do other things. And I'm so pleased because, wow, yeah, I'm having a ball.
Yeah, I feel like that. I'm in no hurry to go, but I certainly don't want to hang around too long. I don't need to live to a ripe old age. I say that and then I go, I'll probably still be here and you'll have me at 101 and I'll still be telling the world, oh, I don't need to go for a long time.
Well, it's
Who
not
knows?
about the
I have no
time.
idea.
It's not about the time, and it's not about the age. It's
Yeah,
about the
because time isn't a thing. Yeah, yeah.
and we've got to release this idea. Like I just turned 70, and I've just told everybody. I was just going to say I hardly tell anybody that,
We all know now.
only because people will put you in a box. Oh
Yeah,
my God,
yeah,
start helping me across the road, and I will swear at them if they do that because I've released this idea of limitations of time and space. I
yeah,
certainly don't want people, trying to put them on me and put me in a box. And people did that when I was grieving. They tried to put me in a box of grief,
yeah,
a grieving mother, which
yeah,
is why I ran away and reinvented myself
yeah.
as
No, we
resilient,
do that.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that it's so unique because yeah, part of what you're saying, I'm like, no, I'd like the opposite. And there's no right or wrong. I love that we're unique and it will go however it will go, and we can prefer one way over another and different things like that. So I think it's important to remember that a lot of what we go through, we've pre-chosen, pre-agreed to. I
Oh,
believe we need to live out our lifetime. I believe there are reasons we're here, and I
yeah,
would like to do that to the full,
definitely.
but
You
I
know,
hope that I achieve all of that before I'm 101. I don't know why.
but why? Because I mean,
I don't know.
you might be at your most magnificent. As women, and when we talk about the goddess energy, which I've embodied over many years, we're at our most powerful as in our 60s and then our 70s. Now I'm just in that. I'm just really hitting my straps. This is
Yeah.
why I'm a crone, what they would call a crone. So the crone was always feared because we're so wise. And I just see my life at this point as autumnal, the harvest. I'm harvesting. I'm just putting in everything that I've sowed and planted and
Yeah.
nurtured all those 25 years since Tim passed over. And I'm in this incredible ripened state of the harvest. So
Yeah.
I just love it.
Yep.
I
I
just love
love that. I'm aware we need to be aware of what we're sowing.
it.
And we're sowing every day. What we sow, we
Yeah.
reap. We are
Yeah.
sowing things every day. So I think it's about living consciously, living with
Yeah.
purpose,
Yeah.
understanding all of our little moments are making up the big moments, and
Yeah.
they're just the little jigsaw pieces. So I really like it. Unwin, thank you so much. Like I said, I think we could chat for hours. There's so much going on here. You've given me some really big things to think about. The one is that the reason death exists. That I think that was my foundational thing of like, wow. Um, yeah, it's fantastic. I'm going to put all your links into the show notes. If you, as a listener, are going through grief or want to understand a bit more, or to tap into any of what Unwin's been talking about today, all the links and everything are down in the show notes. And I really hope that this message can help people to live their best life, get the most out of this life. Because, yes, we're spiritual. Yes, we're having these big, juicy spiritual experiences, but we're also in a physical body, which is why we're having a lot of these experiences. So,
So can I just say that
yeah.
many people aren't at where I'm at,
Oh,
that
totally.
they are
Yep.
at the beginning of grief. Do not, but please don't be put off by where I'm at now, because in my book it goes right back to the beginning. So you go right through the journey of my first 12 years. You will relate to it. You will relate to it. You'll see the journey through from the abject grief to the, oh my God, I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And remembering that you're 25 years down in your
I
journey.
am
So if this
now.
is
Yes,
fresh,
yes,
it may just sound way too hard to
yep,
process.
yeah,
And like I say, we can't rush grief. We can't underestimate grief. Grief is very real, and I do believe we need to go through it.
absolutely. Yeah.
But if you want to reach out and, there are resources, some of this work might be very helpful. So, Anwyn, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's
Oh,
just been
yes,
wonderful to chat with you.
you're a delight. Thank you so much for your openness and your willingness just to hear. That's wonderful. Thank you.